Where are you being gaslighted in your life, and where are you gaslighting in your life? And what if it's not about judging it? It's not about making it right or wrong. It's about the awareness of when you know that someone is gaslighting you.
Telling them that someone's doing it, they're not gonna if the gaslighter has done their job well, they're not going to believe you, and they're actually gonna use you as a way to reject the world. Like, it's gonna actually push them more into the gaslit reality. I have asked people before, especially with gaslighting family, where I'll say, "If a stranger treated you the way your family is, would you tolerate it?"
Oh my God.
They're like, "No," and I'm like, "So why do you tolerate it from your
That
family?
is such a
Because they're
good question.
family?"
Welcome to the Choice, Change and Action podcast, where you get to choose, change, and take action to create a different today and a different future. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Choice, Change and Action podcast. So you are with me, your host, Simone Milasas, and today we have the lovely, the amazing John Wheeler. So welcome, John.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me on.
So the backstory of this is John and I have tried to do this podcast quite a few times, and we're like, we are doing this. So variations of having to change a schedule or internet work not working, Wi-Fi, etc. So here we are. I'm at in Marina Del Rey. I'm at the Ritz-Carlton in Los Angeles because I just left Elugar, 39 nights. Oh my goodness. I thought that I was gonna want to get the hell out of there after being in one place for 39 nights. And that is not what showed up for me. I got to LA last night and I was like, what the hell am I doing? I just wanted to turn around and go back to Elugar. And it's interesting because one of the things I had a lack of sleep. I'm not one of those people who goes, "Hey, I haven't slept in 40 hours and I'm great." I'm like, my body doesn't function that well. I don't function that well if if I haven't slept, and I hadn't slept. So last night I literally used the access consciousness tool of 10-second increments because I was like, Simone, you have to calm the fuck down and just use 10-second increments. So I had a shower, I got out, I ordered food, and I was like, okay. And then I went to bed at 5 p.m. and I slept for 12 hours. So I'm way better today, which is great. So I'm at the Ritz-Carlton in LA. I just went for a walk on Venice Beach. I was like, oh my God. Talk about the antithesis Elugar, but here I am. And John, where are you at?
I'm in my counseling office in Dayton, Ohio. So I'm right downtown in the middle of a city. But
Nice. And in the middle of
it
America,
hasn't
right?
yes, and in the
Ohio?
middle of America. We're considered Midwest, but I feel like we're in a weird position.
Okay. So you're in a
But
weird
Ohio.
position. I like it. So the topic that we wanted to talk about, well, I actually wanted to talk about with you today is gaslighting. And it's a topic that I think a lot of people became a lot aware of a lot recently. I know you have done some classes in it, etc., which we will, in the show notes. Don't forget to subscribe to the show notes. We will put details of where to contact John and any of the classes that he's done or he has coming up as well, because it seems like he has a unique way of referring to this. So I just wanted to read this short um description of gaslighting, and then I'll ask you some questions, John. So it says here, gaslighting is a tactic in which a person or entity, in order to gain more power, makes a victim question their reality. It works much better than you may think. Anyone is susceptible to gaslighting, and it is a common technique of abusers, dictators, narcissists, and cult leaders. It is done slowly, so the victim doesn't realize how much they've been brainwashed. For example, in the movie Gaslight from 1944, a man manipulates his wife to the point where she thinks she is losing her mind. Now, two things with that. Gary Douglas, the founder of Access, always recommends to watch Gaslighting like over and over again. I have watched it a few times, probably like 4 or 5 times. And it's a fascinating film to begin with. And then it gets annoying because of the amount of gaslighting that's done and everything that goes with that. I grew up with, I would say, a very narcissistic mother who was continuously gaslighting me in so many various ways. Whether we go down that road today or not, I'm not sure. But I wanted to ask you first, what's your, hearing that definition of gaslighting, what is gaslighting to you?
I mean, I think that is a great description of it. The way that I've used it in my classes or my class description is that it's a very subtle way of manipulating people into believing another reality. So the only thing that I would add to it is that the gaslighter, in my opinion, is creating it in a way to make them a source of information or a required piece of your life. They try to get you to believe you cannot exist without them.
Right.
Everything comes from them. So it's getting you to basically disconnect from everything that you know is true and then replacing it with what they say is true.
It's true. So also, I just want to say, if you're listening to this, this is a really big topic. So John and I are exploring this, and I recommend that if you have this in your life, go research it yourself. Watch that film. We'll put the link in the subscription notes. Watch the film and ask the question: where are you being gaslighted in your life, and where are you gaslighting in your life? And what if it's not about judging it? It's not about making it right or wrong. It's about the awareness of when you know
Mhm,
that someone is gaslighting you. Because, for example, my mother, like for years, that's what it was like, and I was always on the defense. And when I first met Gary, he used to poke me and say things about my mother, and I'd be like, "No, she's fine," you know. And it was years, years later that I'm sitting at this table. We're having lunch at this restaurant, and there's like 20 of us at this restaurant. Lots of family and friends. And my mother was sitting next to me, and I had some friends sitting across from me, and she turned around to me and she went, "Oh," she goes, "You're looking at me with those creepy eyes that you have." And I grew up with that. I grew up with "You've got creepy eyes." I didn't grow up with "You've got beautiful eyes." I grew up with "You've got creepy eyes." And I'm pretty sure if you're listening to my podcast, you would have seen photos of me. And I have these beautiful, bright blue eyes that everybody comments on, right? And everybody adores. And that's not what I grew up with. And as she said that, I just sort of went, "Yeah, that's what it is." And my friend across from me, I looked at her face and I was like, "What's going on?" And her look on her face was so shocked, and she went, "Um, a lot of people would say that Simone has beautiful eyes." And there was this moment, John, that just went boom, and everything
mhm,
dropped, and I went, "Holy shit." And I went, "This is what I've grown up with." Like, even she would, make comments about my hands, like when I touched her, that and everyone else goes, "Oh, can you massage my shoulders again?" But it was like it was not meant to be, I wasn't meant to touch her or whatever that was because of
yeah,
the strength of my hands, and there's all these continuous things that I grew up with. And until I realized it, I brought all of those lies as real and true and couldn't break away from it. So for me, it's not about changing that person. If they change, that's on them. But it's about not buying that as a truth and knowing who you are, like what, where you are,
mhm,
etc., and you getting to choose for you. So again, this is a really big topic, and anything I'm saying and anything John's saying, you don't need to believe us. You don't need to trust us. I'm not gaslighting you. You don't need to trust us. Trust you and trust what you find out. And if any of this makes you feel lighter, then thumbs up. I'm really grateful for
yeah.
that. Yeah.
Well, and I would add to that too, because I've had it come up in my classes where people say, "I have a friend, and I told them, and they won't leave." And here, this is the other side of it too. Telling them that someone's doing it, they're not gonna if the gaslighter has done their job well, they're not going to believe you, and they're actually gonna use you as a way to reject the world. Like, it's gonna actually push them more into the gaslit reality. So,
Right.
what I have recommended for people when they're like, "Well, how do I help my friend with this?" You ask questions. Like or like how your friend did for you at that lunch where, most people would say Simone has beautiful eyes. Or, like, I have asked people before, especially with gaslighting family, where I'll say, "If a stranger treated you the way your family is, would you tolerate it?"
Oh my God.
They're like, "No," and I'm like, "So why do you tolerate it from your
That
family?
is such a
Because they're
good question.
family?"
Hang on,
Yeah,
we need to pause. That's a really good question. And I'm going to add, not just family, your relationships, your partners, your friends, your colleagues, anyone that you're currently surrounding yourself by. It's like, if,
yeah,
what are you there for? Like, are you being treated well? I love that. Can you
yeah,
expand on that for me?
yeah, so the reason I look at it that way, so people will come in with similar situations, like how you were talking about with your mom, where you grow up with it. And so your family is meant to love you, right? That's what this whole world tells you. The
Yes.
What's the most interesting to me is family is the one projected at the most that's supposed to love you. But then that also in turn creates a place where family is the area that you let the most people abuse you. Because if you have the point of view your family's supposed to love you and you believe it, you can't see any other point of view. So for me, with that question about a stranger, we
Mm,
don't see strangers the same way we do family or friends or relationships. They're strangers.
mm,
So what we'll tolerate from someone we don't know is very different than someone who we've decided something about.
yeah,
So
it's
for me, it's like if you wouldn't let a stranger talk to you that way, why would you let someone who's supposed to love you
mm.
or supposed to care about you treat you in a way that's not loving or caring?
Yeah, and you know, I love that you mentioned this that family is supposed to love you because I grew up with my mother telling me all the time that she loved me. Okay,
Yep.
so but it took me a long time to get what's her definition of love? Because I've learned to realize that yeah, she did love me by her definition, but she didn't like me. And there's a big difference. Like, from the moment I was born, she wanted another son. Like, so, the moment I was born, I was a female. My relationship with my dad was constantly in judgment from her. So we had to hide our relationship all the time. Like, we'd hang out together and have a cup of tea in the backyard or something like that. And we'd hear her wake up and we wouldn't even say anything. We'd just go up,
Yeah.
you know, we knew she was up and we knew, quick, separate. It wasn't worth it for her to walk out and see both of us enjoying each other's company because we knew what was going to come down the road. We knew it was just
Right.
easier to not do that. And but she certainly did say that she loved me all the time. And so what I would ask, if you're listening to this too, is have a look at that and what is your definition of love? One of the things that we talk about in Access Consciousness is what if you were grateful for someone? Because if when you say to someone that you love them all the time, it's like you have a different definition. So right now, if you think of someone that you're close to that you do love, I'm not saying don't use the word love. I actually do use it, right? But look at the energy behind it. And it's like someone that you love at the moment, and you go, I love you. And what pops up in their world? What does that mean? And they're like, shit, does that mean we have to get married? Does that mean this? Does that mean that? Like there's a whole lot of meaning to it. And then someone says to
Mm.
you, I love you, and you're like, damn, what does that mean? Am I meant to do this or blah, blah, blah? Rather than if you change it and look at the energy and say, hey, I'm super grateful for you. Like a mutual friend of ours, Monica Gillum, I was riding horses with her the other day and I was like crying because I was so grateful. And I was like, I'm so grateful. And she said, you're having a gratitude attack. And she said, you know how you have panic attacks? I went, this is a gratitude attack. And I went, God, that's such a good description. It's like, I'm having a major gratitude attack. Yes, you are correct.
That's funny.
So, yeah. Hey, can I ask you why gaslighting for you? What was your life like? Like, why did you choose this topic to be so, um,
That is a good question. I ask myself this all the time because I wouldn't say I grew up in a family that was gaslighting, but if I really look at it for me, I have always had like what I would almost call an intolerance for abuse.
mhm,
Like watching what someone else goes through and seeing how they're treated, and I could always actually see the bigger picture.
mhm,
So I think for me with gaslighting, it's starting to look more from the perspective of empowering people to be able to then get that awareness like you had where it doesn't come overnight. Like there's some weird click that has to happen in a person's universe to go, "Oh, I think I'm being gaslit." And
yeah,
then having an ability to then support them out of it. Because one of the biggest key that I use in classes when people ask me, "How do I get out of gaslighting?" or I've turned the class shutting off the gas to gaslighting. And they're like, "Well, how do you shut it off? Like, how do you stop it?" And my thing has always been being aware. Like,
mm,
you have to actually see what is. And in order to do that and to have your awareness, you can't doubt yourself. So I think for me, I've just developed. this understanding in my life where I don't know that I've ever truly doubted myself, even though I want to believe I have, to the point where I can recall being bullied. So, like, I guess some form of that probably, if I really broke it down, it's probably got some gaslighting in there with the projection of bullies about me being a boy who danced because I liked dancing. I didn't like sports or liking things that were more feminine. And I always had friends that were girls because I just connected with girls. And then fast forward later, surprise, I'm gay. But like being bullied for years about being gay and going, I'm not gay. I don't know what you guys are saying. Why are you picking on me? And then not being a skinny, small person. I've always been kind of chunky and heavy. So I have experienced abuse. I have experienced it in the form of bullying. And then to still come out on the other side where I consider myself very confident and very secure in what I know and how I see the world and making the world a better place. So with gaslighting, I there's just some weird fascination for me.
Mm,
And then the people that have been in classes or like my close friends that I talk to about gaslighting are always looking at it going, well, you have a different perspective with it. So you're very kind in how you approach it, and you're just kind of, I mean, in the access words, we would use allowance, but like when I look at someone who's gaslighting or in a gaslighting relationship, I don't have the point of view you have to leave and get out. I'm like, okay, could you just look at what's going on and then facilitating people to go the direction they want to go? But I think that one of the things that you mentioned was like if you were having tea with your dad and your mom woke up and you guys knew that she was awake or you heard her, you didn't make her wrong and fight her. You just went, okay, mom's up and that means this. And you adjusted your life accordingly
yeah.
because you weren't getting rid of her. And so
No, and
that's part of this too. I always see people who think if someone's gaslighting or mean or whatever, they have to cut them out of their life and they can't have anything to do with them rather than be aware of it and know this is them. It's not you, it's them. It's the reverse of the relationship.
yeah, and I think that's a really good point too, John, because yeah, we chose to, I mean, we chose to not get rid of her. um, but I do remember having a conversation with my father when I was like a bit older, and I said, "Why are you still with her? Because you know, why are you with her?" And my dad, this was my dad's second marriage, and he was a devout Catholic, and the whole story of how he got married first off was interesting because his girlfriend at the time told him she was pregnant. So, which I guess is a form of gaslighting because she wasn't. And him being a Catholic, a good Catholic man at that time, he got married, and then found out that she wasn't pregnant. Found out she couldn't actually have kids, so they adopted a kid, and then she actually did fall pregnant. So they had two children. So this was my mother. That was my father's second marriage, and I remember chatting to him and just going, "Why are you with her? She's so mean to you." Like, and even from like mean, like yelling and things like that. But she would also do this thing of, I don't know, say if you had chicken for dinner and then dad wanted to eat chicken the next night for dinner, she would like just be like, "Well, you had chicken last night. Why are you having chicken tonight? You can't have chicken too." And it was just like, oh my God, if the man wants to eat chicken every day, let him eat friggin' chicken every day. Like it was just
Right.
continuously what he wasn't doing. He was always wrong, even from the clothing he wore. She used to dress him basically. And dad just had all this patience and was like, okay, she would lay his clothes out. And I remember he said to me, "Simone, I married your mother. I will handle this." And he said, "You need to go and live your life. You need to choose." And he said, "Your life is your life. You need to choose. I will always be here for you." Like I had one parent who was incredibly empowering, like just choose. If you fuck up,
Right.
I'm going to be here. And he always was. And then my mother, who was like, "How could you do that? That's so embarrassing. You're embarrassing me. What am I going to tell my friends?" You know, not like, "Hey, how are you? How'd you go with that? I knew you stumble and fall, but maybe, checking in on me." But the way dad was just like, "No, look, I will handle this. I married her. I will handle this." And, at one stage he had a stroke. And it was at the time my dad was 15 years older than my mother. And she had
Mhm.
decided she was from Scotland, my father was from Lithuania, and she had decided that she wanted to start Scottish dancing. There's nothing in my father didn't want to do Scottish dancing you know, and he had a stroke. And I swear to God, my brother and I were like, I think dad had a stroke so that he wouldn't have to go to Scottish dancing. I was like, freaking brilliant, really. Like, amazing. So, but yeah, it's a fascinating topic, and one of the things that Gary keeps talking about as well is learning to gaslight. So can we talk about that piece as well? Because I think when people hear gaslighting, they go, "Oh no, I'm not a gaslighter. I don't gaslight. There's no greatness in this. There's no value in it," rather than actually learning to gaslight. Now, I'll give you an example. Um, I don't know, a few weeks ago, um, just before we were starting the benevolent capitalism class that myself, Gary, and Dane did, and I woke up to some texts from I'm going to say an ex friend of mine in Australia, who has now decided I'm like the most terrible, awful, mean person in the world, and he sent me these texts that were basically saying that, right? And all of this stuff, and I just sort of went, okay. And Gary said, "You need to learn to gaslight." And I just blocked him. And I mean, because I've had my fair share of vilification. But I was like, do I unblock him and write something back? And he was like, "Oh, you need to learn to gaslight because what he's accusing you of is exactly what he did." So can you talk about that? Like in the and using gaslighting, I guess, to your own advantage.
I can try. I will tell you, I don't know that I'm the best person with that, or or sometimes things will fall out of my mouth and I'll go, "Oh, that was gaslighting." So,
I was gonna
I
say,
don't
I think
always
you might be a sneaky good at it, John.
it comes with sarcasm. No, um, for me, with a lot of it so, in the 6th day, because Gary was having this conversation with you and I went, "Oh, there's that piece." Gary was talking about knowing when people doubt themselves, and he
Mhm,
asked you if you knew when people doubt themselves and how to use
yeah,
it to your advantage.
mhm.
That to me is gaslighting
True.
because it's getting like seeing where someone's doubting themselves and then you attack that thing that they're doubting. But
Yeah,
I'm
and see,
trying to think
I
of an
would use
example that
that
I've done where I thought I was gaslighting, but
but see, I would
yeah.
use that to my advantage. So say, let's use, for example, there's a whole bunch of people who have invested in Elugar, and I know that there's conversations that I've had with people where they were like, "Oh, it's impossible." When they look at something that's impossible, and I'm like, "How is it impossible?" Like, or you have to choose. Like, you can choose. So there is that doubt in their world, and um, then encourage for you encourage for them to actually choose what they think they cannot choose, but by gaslighting them to maintain their judgment and their basis of reality that they have created already, that that is not possible because they cannot perceive it, but that's not true because
Right.
anything is possible. So that's I know that that's definitely what I would do as well. But for like this
Well,
person, it's like
I
it
would
was
say
sort
with
of
that
like being mean back, you know?
well, I was gonna say with the example you just gave, the difference would be in that when your target is really to empower,
Yes.
but in gaslighting, it's not about empowering, it's about shutting down and dismantling. So, which I think is where Gary was saying with that gentleman as the example where he said he's accusing you what he just did to you
Yeah.
is like finding the response or the words that then shut down the energy versus with the people with Elgar, it's about building the energy and up
Yes.
like lifting them up and saying, "Oh, look, there's possibility if you choose," versus like, "Shut up and get in your corner and leave me alone."
But I would say both forms are gaslighting. No?
Well, possibly. So I like to look at them in the way that one to me would be manipulating and one would be gaslighting. And to
Okay.
me, those two are different
Yeah.
in the
I
sense to me, like back to that original definition, gaslighting is about control
yeah, and I like the way you said it's
only.
about shutting down and dismantling. So
Yeah.
dismantling where they think that they've got because I mean, seriously, they don't. It's like I mean, I have had a lot of vilification over the years, and I'm like, "Okay, cool." And it used to get me, and I remember at one point I was sitting on my balcony outside having a cocktail with a friend, and he said to me, "Hey, they've won." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Look at you." He said, "You're depressed and sad because of this." And as soon as he said that, I went, "Fuck that." I was like, "They're not winning." And that, like you say, there was this moment that dropped that I went, no, that's not happening. I'm not allowing people to have a point of view about me and it affect me. You can have any point of view about me that you want. I really don't have a point of view anymore. I don't care. I know what I'm choosing. So, judge me, lust after me, whatever it is, it's like I'm still going to choose what I'm choosing. So I have learned to receive the energy of vilification and receive that energy of gaslighting. What I'm currently asking to do is learn
Yeah.
to deliver the energy of gaslighting, to dismantle and shut down when required, just because they friggin' can, you know?
Right. Well, and it's funny because that's I don't know why this time when you said you're talking about it in my head, I got a line, which is like, it's so fascinating to me that you think you're so powerful that what you said matters.
Perfect. Love it.
Like, and this is what makes me laugh in classes because people will bring stuff up and I'll be like, oh, well, try this. And this is where I'm like, maybe I do like that to me. I'm like, is that gaslighting? Is it not gaslighting? I don't
Yeah.
know. To me, it's the snarky, quick witted comeback of like, oh, well, fuck off.
Well,
You
we
know?
were talking about gaslighting the other day at breakfast at El Hogar, and I was there with David Kubis, who you know, and Gaia Compagnon, and who I think both have been on my podcast previously, or David definitely has. And we were talking about like gaslighting, right? And then Gaia said something about Budapest, and David went, "Oh, you call it Budapest, like that's like sweet sort of thing, like Budapest, Hungary." And I said, "Yeah, I call it Budapest too." And he went, "Oh," he said, "I call it Budapest." And I was like, "Oh, it's for those who are educated who say Budapest." And David was like, "Excellent, that's it. You just gaslit
Yeah.
me." I was like,
And it almost, they almost come across like sideways compliments.
right.
It's not a
I
full
like that.
compliment,
Sideways compliments.
which is what how I've described it to people before. I'm like, well, it's complimenting them, but with like a little twist, which is
Mm,
where the gaslighting is. Because then when it hits them, they're like, were they complimenting me or was it a dig?
right.
And then on your end, you get to go, great question. Uh, Or if you really want to continue the gaslighting, then it's, well, of course I was complimenting. Why would I have done a dig?
Right.
That's where you start the lying.
Right. And I was just
What
gonna
did
put
I say that made you take it that way? What do you mean? Why would I have said that?
right. Well, this is also in this article that I have that says people who gaslight typically use the following techniques. Number one is they tell blatant lies. Number two, they deny they ever said something, even though you have proof. Number three, they use what is near and dear to you as ammunition. Number four, they wear you down over time. Number five, their actions do not match their words. Number six, they throw in positive reinforcement to confuse you. They know confusion weakens people. Number eight, they project. Um, it says like for that one, it says they're a drug user or a cheater, yet they are constantly accusing you of that. So
Yep.
this is done so often that you start trying to defend yourself and are distracted. So I think that's it. You start trying to defend yourself. Number nine, they try to align people against you. Number 10, they tell you or others that you are crazy. And number 11, they tell you everyone else is a liar. So, what I'm going to do too is I'm going to create this as a little download and we will put it in the show notes because it's got some descriptions of all of this. So, I'm just looking at us talking about gaslighting so it can create freedom for others. And I
Yeah.
know for myself, it's created so much freedom for me, especially growing up with my mother. Like, really, I mean, the last time I just saw my mother, she's in a home now. She's got dementia. But here's the thing, ever since she's had dementia, she's literally forgotten to be mean to me most of the time. And I was like, well, this is working for me. And the last time I saw her, just before I left to come over here, uh, I was saw her and she thought I was this cousin from Scotland and blah blah blah. And then she has these brief moments of remembering you. And then I hugged her, but she said she had a sore back like this. And so I hugged her and I put my hands on her back and then I went, "Oh, I won't touch your back." And she looked at me and she went, "You're such a little bitch." And I went, "What?" And then she went, "Oh no, that's right. You're a good person." And I just stood there. My sister-in-law was with me and I went, "Okay." I went, "Did you just call me a bitch?" And she went, "Oh," and like made this joke. And I was like, "Okay, bye, mum." I was just like, "Oh my God, like you're incredible." But my whole life, but it's given me so much freedom because I would like people, if you are surrounded by that, to choose something different for yourself today. Because it took me until my mid 40s to actually divorce it and break away from it. And every time I would go to my parents' house, every time I would leave and I would be crying. Like she would just treat me so badly. And there was somewhere in my world I was like, if I just did this, then she will love me the way I think love should be. Like she'll be grateful for me if I just did this. And it never showed up. So I would just be a mess for a while after leaving her. And then I finally went, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not doing this. But it did take me to my mid 40s. So I'm hoping that anyone
Yeah.
listening to this, that it doesn't take you that long, that you can actually start to have that penny drop and choose something different today, is what I'm asking for. And the second piece is, now, like I said, I'm in training and learning how to gaslight so I can use it to my advantage. So, because how many people have the judgment that you're not supposed to gaslight? And what if you could use it to your advantage? So everything that that is, time to go zillion, we destroy and uncreate it. Right and wrong, good and bad, pock and pot, all nine shorts, boys, provads, bases, and beyonds. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, the clearing statement of access consciousness has changed. So, and if you haven't heard that clearing statement, you can find out more about it at theclearingstatement.com. And I think we have a link to what just changed with it as well on there. So, yeah. So, what else with gaslighting, John? What else do you recommend for people to start, looking at and being aware of and being able to change to create something greater for themselves?
I mean, there's so much research out there right now. Like when you were saying before, if you think this is something that's like, you're experiencing, you can literally go on Google, just type in the word gaslighting, and there's tons of information. I think the woman who wrote the list that you were reading, if I remember correctly, is Dr. Stephanie Sarkis, I believe. She has, if it is, if not, she wrote a different article.
I was going to say, I don't have who wrote this. So, if
Okay,
you have
I
the name
think,
and it is, I'll send it to you because I would like to, give credit to
yeah,
whoever it is that
I
that did.
believe it's Dr. Stephanie Sarkis, and she actually started writing that article. I think, in fact, came out in 2016 when we had the U.S. election, and that kind of, we think elections are, they're interesting, but so much unlocks sometimes, and that election really put gaslighting back on the marketplace and has just exploded the research. Um, Dr. Stephanie Sarkis has a great book called Gaslighting. It's a bright yellow book. You cannot miss it. That's the first book I read before I started like really diving into doing these classes, and she's phenomenal. And
Well, what does she talk
my
about it? Does she, because the thing that I see everyone's talking about, are you being gaslighted, right? Not what if you could use it to your advantage. So I love the way Gary's sort of
Yeah.
using it to flip as well. So is she in her book, is she just talking about like, are you being
So
gaslighted?
in her book, and pretty much every book I've read from someone in clinical mental health, is going to be specifically about what does gaslighting look like.
Right.
Most of them do not talk about gaslighting back because they actually say in mental health that gaslighting back doesn't work.
Okay.
I also think, depending on the type of person, like the more that I've researched it, which is where I don't talk about it as much, but I will when people bring it up. Um, I think a lot of the reasons why they say not to do it back is because most people don't have the empowerment behind it. Like they don't actually have the security, or like, I don't really know the words to put with it, but to be willing to stand in front of someone who's gaslighting you and gaslight back takes a lot of courage.
Yeah, it
And I
does.
don't know that a lot of people have the tools to do that, which is
Yeah.
where, with access, we give people a lot of tools
Yeah.
of how to like create your life and handle people. Most of the clinical mental health side of it is really about you're in it and you're a vulnerable person. And I remember the very first shutting off the gaslighting class I did in New York. I think it was February this year, actually. Someone asked me a question, it broke something, and then at the end of the class, the words that came out of my mouth, and I was like, okay, I now get the target of what I'm trying to create with this, was these classes and the things I'm doing are not about getting rid of gaslighting, because that's a choice that gaslighters have to make. They have to choose not to do it, blah, blah. My target is to empower people to understand that when you go through these things, You are not a victim to them, and you can come out on the other side feeling more empowered. And it sounds really weird, but in that class, I said, "What if you actually got the gift of being gaslit?" Because, like Simone, you talked about with your mother, you will not allow another person to gaslight you from this point forward. Or if you do, you're gonna know, like, you're gonna start getting aware of exactly what it is. That's the gift of having someone in your life that gaslights. You get a very, very clear energy of like, oh, that. I'm not tolerating that anymore. It's not a choice.
Yeah.
It's not a choice I'm making.
That is very true.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and that's where I got to the shutting off the gas in the
Mm.
title. It's not about stopping the gaslighting, it's about taking the key and turning your gas off and not supplying.
Yeah.
Because we, to me, it's our reaction to them that gives them their power. So when you're like, oh, interesting, this person's trying to gaslight me, then it gives you the choice. You can react if you get that creates more. You cannot react. You can gaslight back. You can smile at them and go, thank you. Like, once you get aware of an energy or like the way this person's interacting with you, to me, that's when the doors open as to how you get to respond. But until you see what's in front of you, how do you handle it? It's like
Yeah.
being in a cage with a door, and until you actually realize that it's unlocked, like you have to try to push the door before it will open. But if you just sit there and look and say the door is closed, you're trapped. But that's where like I even laugh because as I talk about these topics, I smile and I get happy, and I'm like, who gets happy talking about abuse? Apparently, I do. I'm a weirdo.
But it's
Like, always in these classes, I'm smiling and I'm
yeah.
like, "Whatever," and then I'm like, "Why like, what is making you happy about this?" But there
Well, I think
maybe
it's
Simone has
the
insight to that for me, but
it's the freedom. I think it's the freedom that you are empowering people to actually have. Because just as you explained this, I went when I was 19, I left to go overseas and I told everyone I was going for 6 months. I ended up leaving, I staying for 3 years, right? So at one stage, my brother came over to visit me, and at one stage, my mother came over to visit me. And when my mother came over, we did a tour in part of Italy, and one of those organized tours on a buses and blah blah blah. I did it with her, and she has all these stories from that trip that never occurred. And like years later, she would talk about all this stuff and she would make up these lies about what happened. And I would try and defend it. And I'd go, but mom, that never happened. Like, and then she would argue with me about that. And she'd be like, oh, but you're always just arguing. You never want to do that. And but it was less gaslighting on top of gaslighting on top of gaslighting until eventually I just went, why do I give a shit that she's telling these
Mhm,
lies about our trip in Italy? Like, so I just sort of let it go. And I always remember Gary Douglas talking about being vulnerable. And most people think being vulnerable is being weak, and it's not. And he described being vulnerable is like being a marshmallow. When you poke a marshmallow and then it just goes back to being a marshmallow, like it goes back to being the same thing. And that's what I started to be with that. I was like, this is not getting, because I was like, "Why won't you tell the truth about our trip to Italy? Why are you making up lies?" And then I realized, "Why am I fighting this? Like, it doesn't mean anything, it doesn't matter, it's not relevant." And so as you're talking about that, that's what was coming up for me too, John, is the amount of gaslighting in so many different ways that I was perpetrated upon me. And like you said, now I'm like, no, that I won't have that. And I just realized too, and thank you for this, is with Gary saying you need to learn to gaslight, he's not like you need to learn to gaslight the maid that comes into your hotel room or anything. He's like, you need to learn to gaslight the people who are vilifying you if you
right.
choose, right? And it's like, some of the things that we've had come out and there was one article we were sent. Well, they said they were questions. They weren't questions, they were accusations. And it was like, how do you respond to this? How do you respond? And it was like, there's nothing to respond except, going into defense. And it's like, I don't need to go into defense. And I'm not ashamed of anything that I've chosen, and I have never chosen like these things that they were accusing me of are not true. So then what do you choose? And because you're a public figure, you can't sue anyone, blah, 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 all that sort of stuff. Like, so we didn't respond, and I didn't respond to anything. But when you get these personal texts, that are from people who, with the vilification, that's where I get the piece of like, yeah, what if I did learn to gaslight just because it was friggin' fun? You know, not because I
Right.
have to, not because it means anything that's relevant, but it's like, dude, have you seen some of the stuff that you've chosen? Like, and you're accusing me of this? Okay. You're like, go on your merry way, son.
Well, that's why I'm like, "Don't you have anything better to do? I know
I
your life
know.
is boring, but don't you have anything better to do?"
I literally one of
Another
the
great
tools I
line.
use, yeah, one of the tools I use is for myself is I get to wake up and be me. And it's like and I wake up, John, and 99.9% of the time I wake up with such a sense of joy and peace and happy in my world and ready to,
Yeah.
choose and create and actualize. And I'm like, and they wake up with this level of vindictiveness and meanness and all of that in their world. And I'm like, okay, good on you. If that's the way you want to live your life, thumbs up. I'm not living like that. I'm choosing
Yeah.
something different. So yeah, there's so
Well,
many.
nothing drives gaslighters crazier than when you get happy and free
Yes.
and you're not supplying them anymore. Because
Yeah.
they're like, if you think about a gaslighter's target, which is to have control and to have a supply, once you're no longer supplying it, it's like it's literally like a gaslight, which is why I love the term. If you turn the gas off, the light goes out. And
Perfect.
so that person either has to go the hell away and find another target or find a way to try to pull you back in. But then that's where I'm like, awareness is the antidote. Because once you're aware of it, you're like, I'm not supplying you anymore. You don't go back. But as long as you're not aware, they're going to keep tugging on you. It's their whole purpose is to suck you back in,
And have
which has its
control.
own term called hoovering, named after the Hoover vacuum.
Wow. Wow, that's hilarious. Profit is how much living you can create when you are willing to create a bigger life. Please join my latest and very low cost membership with me, Simone Milasas, at the Profit Club. SimoneMilasas.com/Profit Club. So, so right now, I would, if you're listening to this too, ask yourself: is there anybody who has control of you, who you are giving control to, that you actually don't desire to? And is that an element of gaslighting? And what difference could you choose? And everything at that is times of God selling, we destroy and uncreate it. All right, non good and bad, pock and pot, all nine shorts, boys, provads, basis, and beyonds. And John, is there anything that you would like to offer to them to start being in question about it?
Oh, there's so many things. I guess the biggest piece of it, I would say, is what you started to mention, which is relevance. That has been really big this last week for some reason in my world, where like watching people who are struggling with different things, whether it's this or your business or your money or uh, any area of your life, but I'm watching people who come up against problems,
Mm,
and then I'm going, but if they didn't make this one thing relevant, like if you stop making the problem relevant, what is actually available? The same would be true with this. It's like, what are you making relevant that isn't relevant? That if you stop making it relevant, it would have no power. It would have
yeah.
no control.
You have choice, infinite choice.
Yeah.
I love it.
Which I'm finding that's like the most terrifying thing for people. Like, and I've had people come in my office who've worked with me, and this was like, it was so funny. We had a great laugh about it. But a client came in after dealing with their parents and said, John, it's so weird after working with you. I'm starting to realize like I get to choose like what I do each day and like what I want to do for my future. And
Mm,
I said, yeah. I said, it's weird, isn't it? And they just said, yeah. And they just started cracking up. I'm like, but that's where you want to be in your life, no matter where you are,
mm.
is that recognition. You get to wake up in the morning and choose.
Yeah.
So what are you choosing?
Exactly. Like I mentioned when I arrived here last night and I started to like have my own little mini freak out and I went, stop it. And I was like, choose in 10-second increments. Okay, go have a shower. And literally I was like, go have a shower. Okay, order some food. You're hungry, order some food. And I did that and I was like, watch Netflix, because I had a billion things that people are going, can you do this? Can you do that? And I was like, no, nothing. Watch Netflix and sleep by 5. It was like you choose and you
Yeah.
get to choose your reality. It's like you get to choose to be stressed out, frustrated, be controlled, etc., or you get to choose something different. So, John, I am super grateful for you being on here. And where can people find you? We will have all those details in the subscription notes. So, as I mentioned before, please don't forget to subscribe and also review us. I would love wherever you listen to this, if it's on, Spotify, Apple, blah, 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 all those different places, if you could give us a review, I would be super grateful and share the podcast with anyone and everybody. So, John, where can people find you?
The best place to find me, it would be my website, which is www.john-wheeler.com. Um, and then if you want specifics about any of the stuff I've done on gaslighting, there's some other free resources. Like when this podcast is done, I'll link it there as well.
Mhm.
It is john-wheeler.com/gaslighting. Very complicated.
Great. And you
Um,
are a counselor, you're an access consciousness facilitator. So John, is available for, private sessions and he has classes, etc. as well. So
yeah,
we will have all of that listed so people can find you if you choose.
yeah.
Anything else you'd like to add here, John, before we say au revoir?
I don't think so. I mean, thank you for having me come on and talk about it. I get excited about the topic, and so there's not always places to talk. You don't just like go out and get coffee and talk about gaslighting with people, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm grateful for the invitation to come on and reach so many people and have a conversation with you about it because I know you've been talking about my classes in your classes. Um, but yeah, just like I said before, if you're someone out there who's experiencing gaslighting, there would be 2 points. One, it's not you, it's them. You know, the whole old relationship cliches. It's not you, it's me. But in this case, it's the opposite. It's not you, it's them. And the second piece is if you're experiencing this, no, there's lots of resources out there. You just need to reach out and you can come out on the other side without being less than where you started. I feel like that's what's happening a lot. But you can come out on the other side of this empowered no matter what's taking place in your life.
Absolutely. And can I just say that's what access consciousness is about. Like I am so having, more gratitude attacks, as Monica says all the time, like just so grateful for all the different tools that we have in every single different area, whether it's relationships, business, money, everything. There's just so much available. And you can become more of you. And that's my desire, is that you become more of you. Every question you ask, every tool you use, you have more of you. So thank you, John, for being here. You're amazing. And thank you, everybody, for listening. And again, please review, share, all that sort of stuff. And we will see you next time. Thank you. Bye bye. If you enjoyed this podcast, please make sure to hit the follow or subscribe button on your favorite listening platform to get notified of new episodes. We read all the reviews, so if there's any topic you would like to hear about, let us know. If you'd like to know more about the tools, information, and classes mentioned in the podcast, head on over to SimoneMilasas.com and follow me on Instagram at Simone Milasas, or the podcast has its very own link on Instagram at Choice, Change, and Action. Don't forget, you can download the show notes. And lastly, have way too much fun today.